Tragedy on the train tracks. Two teenagers hit on the trestle near Taylorsville Road.
I just cannot fathom why anyone would do that.
At night, a monster lures his prey.
In 2016, a woman fell to her death during a hunt for a mythical monster, half man, half goat.
And that was just a superstition. If you go across the bridge, the Poplick monster, you will see.
The Poplick monster is a creature that comes out at night and it lures you across the train tracks into his eyes.
When the train came, we know Savannah was hit and did not survive. They hope by sharing their story, Savannah's death can teach others to stay off the trestle and avoid the spell of the Poplick monster. With photojournalist Beth Peak, I'm Haley Minogue, WHAS 11 News.
The RRN Ropin Radio Network is brought to you by 511 Tactical. Always be ready. By OMSI, the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, inspiring scientific study. By the Ark Encounter. Think bigger. And by the Wildlife Safari, America's top cheetah breeding program. You are closer to Africa than you think.
Hello, welcome to Ropin Network. I am your guest speaker, Jeff Carone, and here is your host, Jacob Gira.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, indeed, this is the RRN broadcasting from the heart of Oregon, Salem's capital. Welcome in my fellow Oregonians from all the surrounding counties, such as Coos Bay, Lynn County, Multnomah County, and of course, Marion County. Thank you for commenting and subscribing to our network. But if you're joining us on Spotify, you're in for a treat because it's going to be a longer show today. Jeff, are you ready for your first discussion into the cryptozoological field?
I am ready.
Yeah, it should be pretty interesting too. But, well, of course, this is not a field for everyone. But for those who are willing to get more involved and go into a more serious approach, then it can be a very exciting field, especially when you're talking about living dinosaurs. But there are times when we talk about things in this world that don't belong. And that something we will be tackling shortly. Let's welcome back our guest today from, I always want to say this incorrectly. Is it Waxahachie, Jason?
You know what? There's as many pronunciations as there are people. The most usual pronunciations, though, is Waxahachie.
Waxahachie.
So you weren't too far off.
Okay. He is the author of Metroplex Monsters, a researcher of cryptozoology from the Biblical Worldview, and creator of the Siru Papers. This is Jason McLean. I'm so glad to have you back, Jason. As always, bringing your insights, your understanding to a field that desperately needs it. Yes. So I thank you.
Oh, hey, Jake, I always love being on the show. You know that. You know I love you. The team, it's, whether or not I love you in an HR appropriate way, I don't know. I mean, that's for the court to decide. But you can also see me on Jason McLean Questions Everything on YouTube now. It's finally going. Usually I've got 3 episodes a month, but I also do like these shorter 10, 15-minute videos once or twice a week, depending on how the spirit hits me. So you can follow me over there as well.
Perfect. Excellent. And I'm sure that our audience will be doing exactly that. Jason, I got to say, every time I have you on the show, I say this in the most polite way as I possibly can. I'm so jealous of you. You want to know why, folks? I think you should know why. Because in 1992, this gentleman actually saw 5 feet from him a living pterodactyl on the 10 Mile Creek, DeSoto area of Texas. 10 Mile Creek. This thing was in broad daylight. Wasn't afraid of humans. Saw him. He saw it. And from that moment in time, I believe that's when his And this kind of created a whole new world for him. It kind of just pushed him forward in the right direction. Not in a bad way, but in a fantastic way, to where he can share with others his own personal experience that would lead them to seek the truth. And that's what we're all about here. That's what this network is about. See, this... I wish I could be there at that moment of time. I wish we had Google Earth at that moment in time. Jason, what
I wish I had a camera or a net. I'm sorry, what?
Go ahead, say what you're going to say.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, I wish I had a net or a camera or something. Like, it's just, and unfortunately, life does get in the way sometimes with stuff like that. Although I do have a confession to make.
Okay.
I, too, am jealous of you. Your beautiful, beautiful hair. I mean, I know I have this glorious skull that I know that you're also jealous of. You didn't want to talk about that, but I am just your mane that you have. It is glorious.
It is pretty luxurious, yes.
I'd like to pick apart his brain more often because he comes across as a very intelligent individual. I think he is. Yeah, he's too modest sometimes. Shakes his head.
No, but yeah, the event itself, you're right. I mean, even a few years ago, I probably would have said, well, I say a few years ago, but I'm getting old. Probably like in 2016, I wouldn't have said that it had a big impact on my life. But at this point, I have to say, yeah, no, that literally changed the trajectory of my life. Even though I was, raised a young restorationist, still am. I'm just flexible in what young means, as far as understanding. I think there could be some nuance there, but fundamentally, that there were still living dinosaurs. I believed that at the time, still believe it now, obviously.
Right.
So in many ways, I'm like, it really shouldn't have had that big of an impact, but it has, because it's allowed me to look at people and say, you know what, this story sounds insane, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. And it's led me to pursue some of these other ideas and other evidences, and sort of shows me, hey, the world isn't the way we think it is sometimes. In fact, it probably isn't the way we think it is most of the time. And that's part of the gag, and that's also why I've actually grown in many ways. The pursuit of cryptozoology and Forteana in general has drawn me closer to the Bible, because I see the text. And it's more accurate than any other description of the world that I've ever seen. And it's drawn me closer to that, and that's why I do what I do.
Good. We need more of that, Jason. Absolutely. Folks, if you're wondering, if you're just joining us, and because maybe Jason's a familiar face, and you've seen him on other shows and seen him on his own show, who are we and what do we believe here on the Ropen Network? Well, first of all, I have talked about other things before, but we do believe that Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior. We do believe the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the three in one. Okay. We also believe there's a supernatural side to our world that would explain so much of what people are seeing. And these are the things that are fantastic, but they're also the horrific. That'll be part of the story today, the subject today. And I want to be very clear that I started this network because I wanted to be able to be a voice for someone else, an eyewitness who's willing to come forward, share their story, and move on. And surprisingly, what you see on this network is just a small fragment, because I'm mostly just talking to people, phone calls, small little notes here and there. The brave ones venture forward on this show and want to be seen and want to be heard, and they also are ready to move on. We believe that there are creatures in this world that are still alive, that have survived, such as the pterodactyls of Texas, pterosaurs here in Oregon, though very few in number, Washington State, Arkansas, you name it, they're all over the place. But there are also some other creatures in this world that I feel don't belong here. As in his book, you want to hold it up for me, Jeff?
Yeah,
Metroplex
absolutely.
Monsters that he wrote. Both you holding up. He chronicles very wonderfully accounts of a really disturbing creature with horns, but also parts of a man. Okay. We hear the affiliation of lizard man, mothman, dog man, and now goat man.
Yes.
Yeah. There's more to it. And it goes way back, as I believe Jason would know, and as Jeff Carone would know as well. We'll talk about that. First, gentlemen, I'd like to answer some comments that were made on the last previous show that we had. The subject was the living grotesque, and that was with Brian Lyle, who had an encounter with a winged humanoid that he believes represents a gargoyle in some way. Nonetheless, he did see it 30 feet from him. I think with a big illuminated flashlight, when you shine it on a creature, you're going to see that something's terribly wrong, something's off. I'd like to take that moment now and address the comments that were made by one particular individual. This isn't just a show, it's also a ministry. All right? So I want to do my best and try to answer that question. Let me start off by reading the first question, and then Jason, we'll start with you, okay? Let's see how you can address that comment. I heard one story where someone claimed a lizard man attacked them. Well, if that was the case, where's the injuries or proof of the injuries? Just because it's reaching towards you doesn't mean it's attacking. Maybe it's got a hand up trying to say, no, wait, I'm not here to hurt you. But then the person screams and to prevent its own demise, it takes off running and maybe plow through the person to get away. Still not an attack, it's a defense from being attacked. Is a deer slamming into the side of a truck as it flees a cougar an attack from the deer? No, it's an accidental freak coincidence that your truck just happened to be the escape route blockage. And this is from, I'm not sure exactly who, he or she, Miso Don Task 5562. I hope I said that right. Apologize if I didn't. Thank you for the comment. Let's try to address that if we're prepared. Jason, would you please enlighten us?
Yes. So this is something that happens a lot in cryptozoology, is you kind of have to reverse engineer the situation, right? Because a lot of people will interpret an action by one of these cryptids in a particular way. That doesn't mean they're properly understanding the situation. It's an unknown situation. They don't know how this creature would react. So it is a fair question to ask in my experience. However, allow me to say this one thing, because this is something that I think isn't stated enough in cryptozoology, because there's this desire to throw everything into this cryptid box, which is often, sadly, a purely materialistic box. Just because something is physical doesn't mean it's necessarily exclusively a material creature. When we start talking about things like Dogman and Goatman and Lizard Man and you know, gargoyles and these other things, let's be honest, there just isn't really for many of them, if not all of them, with the exception of a few here and there, like pterosaurs and even Bigfoot, there isn't a good reason for these creatures to exist as a naturally occurring creature, like a dog or a cat or a cow or us, right? And the thing that I have found, there is a pattern to a lot of these creatures, which is the creation of fear. A lot of these entities seem to go out of their way to be threatening or to appear threatening, to appear like they're assaulting, and yet they don't follow through. I've got a lot of accounts of Dogmen seemingly like trying to crawl through a doggy door and terrifying the person, and you stop and you look at all these stories, you're like, hold on, this creature is what everyone says it is. If this lizard man is 7 foot tall, hundreds of pounds, if they wanted to eat you, they would. However, the frequency with which these entities appear, they terrorize people and then disappear, it leads one to the understanding that maybe, or to at least ask the question, maybe the terror is the point. If this was a material, naturally occurring creature that was just wrong place, wrong time, yeah, probably wasn't necessarily an assault. If, however, it's something else, and I think that at this point we have sufficient evidence to show that a lot of these creatures are something else, they fall under that something else category, then the terror and fear that is felt by the person at that time may very much be the reason for the assault. It isn't physical harm, it's emotional harm. And that may be the point. Whether it feeds off of it, whether it just enjoys doing it, whether it marks the person in some way, we don't know. you don't want to get over your skis with, what you think versus what you know. But at a certain point, there is a pretty strong pattern of behavior. And at this point, we just have to conclude that the terror is the point. The fear is the point.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with you, Jason. I think that there are different forms of attacks as well, as I'd like to reiterate. There's physical and there's spiritual. As I've gone through personally, when I've seen a reptilian about 4 feet from me out off of my bed. But again, I was dabbling in some things back then that were pretty dark. I'm glad I'm not like that anymore. But I think that's what brought this thing out. It actually was infiltrating. And then may have been surprised that I opened my eyes and saw this thing. May have been his downfall for it, but I'm glad I saw it. But this was definitely a spiritual attack. And I could feel the presence of evil. Thank you for answering that comment there, Jason. Jeff, would you like to chime in on this one?
Oh, Jason, I couldn't agree more with you, and I'm reminded as you were talking about that cartoon years back, Monsters, Inc., where they would actually take those kids and fill up the meter with fear. And, man, we could talk about this for hours, how the fear alone is enough for what they're feeding on. When you start talking about sound frequency and all that, how everything reverberates and it means something. And like you said, you don't want to get over your skis on it, but we do know, and we can back this up historically, even biblically to a degree, on what this does. But a lot of this the satanic occults and other things that are around this, they get so much power off of fear, and these entities are actually able to pierce that veil more to appear in the third dimension from the dimensionals that they are when this is presented in them. And so I like what you said there, Jake, about you were dabbling in things you ought not to, and I wonder how many of these people have, even if they're not doing anything per se wrong, generational curses, as we see in the Bible, how it's passed on from generation to generation, and what we're seeing here. And we're seeing an uptick of these more and more, even as we see our own nation become more and more godless, and it all intertingles together. And I don't want to unload too much here on this question, because we'll do it in order and everything.
Sure.
But I think you hit the nail right on the head there, the fear, because they absolutely could dominate any one of us. But there's power in that. And so just like love is a power, right? Yeah. It conquers all, love conquers all, and we know the field source they power on. So, yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Let's move on to that last comment here. With Brian's story, it sounds more like it was toying with them. If it wanted to, it would have caused harm to someone. And just because it is scary looking does not mean it's evil. This whole theory of God couldn't have made these things because they are scary looking and deadly makes no sense at all. A hippo looks like it should be calm, cool, and cuddly thing, but they will eat your ass with no qualms about it. Are we going to sit there and say God didn't create them because of that? Hippos are very deceiving, so God couldn't have made them, right? Platypus have spurs in its wrist that inject a toxin into the unfortunate, but they appear harmless. We going to deny God of that creation may as well deny God making the dinosaurs as well, because they're not one of them isn't somehow dangerous or intimidating. Logic is the basis of all theories, no matter if those theories are incorrect or far-fetched or otherwise. Without logical guess, all you have is fairy tales. Thank you for the comment again. Jason.
Well, okay, so the idea that something looks scary and therefore is not made by God, I mean, you have spiders, and you can go either way on that. I'm terrified of spiders as an arachnophobe. So that having been said, I think the issue here, and again, I didn't hear the original comment, so some of the context is lost. I will say this, though. I would never say because something looks scary, it's not made by God, right? Or something is dangerous and therefore is not made by God. Let's be honest, the world is full of animals that look terrifying or look benign but are willing to absolutely kill you. Deer will kill you and eat part of you if given the opportunity. There are no such thing as herbivores. There are only less successful predators. Anyone who's actually looked into zoology understands everything will eat everything given the opportunity. Cows and horses, you got to keep them away from baby chickens because if they get the opportunity, they'll do it. When something dies in the woods, the first thing that shows up are often deer to scavenge off the body. Rabbits, squirrels, all of them will do terrible, terrible things. So I agree with that aspect of it. However, things like lizard man, dog man, goat man are so far outside of the average understood zoological world that there really is no good explanation for their existence as a naturally occurring animal, right? I think this is one of those things we need to take into consideration from time to time is just because something's out there doesn't mean it exists naturally, even if it has a physical body. It may not always have a physical body. It could be. I hate the fact that shape-shifting is a reality, at least to some degree, because I don't like things being overly wacky in the world. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the X-Men. Mystique is cool, but the idea that somebody could change into something, and that's like a no-no. Like that's not. And again, let me take this question one step further on the whole shape-shifting thing. We're assuming the person physically changes and that it isn't simply us perceiving the demonic entity taking complete control.
That's right.
Anyone who has spent any time with missionaries who've spent time in the deep, recesses of this world, with uncontacted people or people who's out in the middle where things like voodoo and witchcraft are the norm. Or if you've had contact with real legitimate occultists, real legitimate voodoo, not this modern American Western Tupperware witch crap. I mean the real thing.
Yeah.
Right? There's plenty of stories of these witch doctors seemingly transforming into other things, right? Well, the question becomes, are they physically changing, or is simply the demon within them manifesting? Right? The spirit within them given some sort of form through them. So, again, if it's physical, that doesn't mean it's a biological entity. But the simple fact of the matter is, there's zero explanation for like a dog man or a goat man or a lizard man or a gargoyle from a natural biological thing. I leave open the possibility of something like, say, Bigfoot. Again, that's a nuanced conversation because I think a lot of it's actually supernatural. But there's plenty of physical evidence, and we have records. We have apes. We have archaeological evidence of apes over 8 feet tall. There's no reason to look at something like a Bigfoot and say that is unreasonable to exist. But a dog that's 7 feet tall, that's walking on its hind legs, no reason for that. A humanoid, reptile, no. There's no reason to think that thing's walking around. And we don't have any archaeological evidence for any of this stuff. And because the larger surrounding stories are often so riddled with the supernatural, we have to conclude that these are supernatural entities and therefore not necessarily something God was like, that looks like a great idea. Let's make that. The platypus, God was like, this is what it needs to survive within its ecological niche. The hippopotamus, this is what it needs to do to survive in its ecological niche. There is no ecological niche for a 7 foot tall, red-eyed, glowing reptile person. Except for maybe in hell. So
Right,
Good
absolutely,
point.
yep.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate that. Jeff?
Man, your analogies are just, the Tupperware witch, that's just awesome. I'm still in that. That's good, those analogies. And I couldn't agree with you more. And I really like how you keyed in on our perception of what we see. And, it's like some animals can see more spectrums of light and stuff like that. And so some animals can actually see infrared where we can't. And even females have more color cones in their eyes to decipher colors than men do, some 4 or 6. But my point point being is some people are, you call it a gift or a curse, but they are able to see more into the spiritual realm. And so the Bible says that the devil often comes as an angel of light. And if you look at the Greek word there for that, that's masquerade, to masquerade. So here he is, an angel of light, but at the same time he keeps his whole evil nature behind it, hidden. And so you wonder how many, again, I go back to either generational curses or what people are wrapped up in that make them more sensitive and prone to that. That's why you get heard a lot of reports where one person sees and the other person is right there. Well, even with Paul, when he was going on the road to Damascus, the men with him, they saw a light, but they didn't hear the voice, So just because you have one eyewitness that says one thing and another person says, I didn't see nothing, does not develop that. But yeah, ugly does not mean that God didn't create it at all. So I don't think that it's totally out the window there. So.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Let me elaborate on something here real fast. I've talked about the fact that when God comes, he comes with full understanding, with peace, with clarity. So when you see something like this, what do you get from it? Can you pick up on a demonic presence if you are unsaved? That might be a good question to ask.
Right.
Well, let's think about something for a moment. Remember when Pharaoh had the dream of Egypt in trouble? They turned to Joseph. He couldn't understand this dream, but it came with profound meaning. And he was so overcome by it that he couldn't answer this dream. So he called upon Joseph to answer this dream. Okay? Joseph knew exactly what it was. He answered it immediately because Joseph was walking with God. The Pharaoh wasn't. But God wanted to save Egypt. Okay? My point is, when God comes to you, if he sends a messenger, the messenger will tell you who they are and who they represent if they come from the one true God. If these creatures are not shedding any light on the subject, run. Okay? I don't believe they're from him. People have said, hey, when angels come, most people would drop to their knees. They didn't fall backwards, by the way. This isn't the healing thing where you fall backwards. Right. They fell forward, and they began to worship. He said, stop worshiping me. I'm a messenger. Rise. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Okay? These are important things to remember. When he sends his messengers to come for you, they come with aid, all complete understanding. But a creature like this does not. It comes to either torment or confuse you. That's anarchy. It's chaos. There's no light there. Something to understand. Okay? I think you'll find that both these gentlemen would agree with me on that one. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate that. It's important to answer these comments. I didn't want to do it on the thread because it just seems kind of cheap. I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore. You know what? These are good questions that people ask, and they're searching for meaning themselves. Right. It's also ministry. Okay? Let's move forward. As I mentioned before, we're dealing with another part man-like creature for the subject of our show today. And this creature is called the Goatman. For the longest time, I've been wanting to embark on this, but to be honest, I don't know very much about it. So here's my chance to come to a better understanding about it as well. That's why Jason's here. That's why Jeff is here. Jason wrote the book Metroplex Monsters. He's done a good study on this Goatman-like creature. But I have to wonder, where does it begin? We could probably go all the way back to biblical times. We could search chapters. We could search for Gilgamesh. We could look at the book of Enoch, or Enoch, however you want to say it. But I will say this, it probably begins with Maryland. Let me read this real fast and then we'll embark, okay? Jason, you'll take it from there. Shrouded in mystery, this monster has plagued Prince George's country since the 1970s. Some of the first sightings began in a bizarre house behind St. Mark, the Evangelist School in Hyattsville. The Goatman apparently lurks around a bridge. It's always a bridge. In Bowie, named Governor's Bridge, but nicknamed Crybaby Bridge. The Goatman's preferred targets are couples who dare enter his bridge Supposedly, if you park under the bridge after dusk, you might hear the shrill screaming of a crying baby or even the braying of a goat. Even more unlikely, you may even see the Goatman himself. The Goatman has also been seen to jump on cars and attack the drivers, kill pets, break into houses and search for food, capture civilians in the woods, and even chop people's heads off. Ugh. Maryland is the subject of a few gruesome murders involving decapitation, with surviving eyewitnesses seeing the creature with an axe cutting heads off the victims. That's brutal stuff. Another noteworthy case is the Kentucky Goatman. The Pope Lick monster is an infamous hybrid creature that many claim lives under an old railroad trestle bridge in Louisville, Kentucky. Those who have seen him describe the creature as part man, part goat. He's covered in greasy fur, with sharp horns protruding from his pale white forehead and equipped with cloven hooves in the place of feet. The Pope-like monster stands upright like a man, but the vicious beast is capable of inhuman strength. He is said to have supernatural powers. The origins of the Pope-like monster varies. Some believe him to be the product of human-animal relations, bestiality. The creature is said to stalk his victims by luring them onto the trestle of the tracks on Pope-like Bridge, which is 90 feet, with an uncanny ability to mimic the voice of those they trust. It is here on the top of the bridge the victims meet their death, often resulting on oncoming train. There have been 11 injuries on this particular bridge, with 9 deaths. However, if you look even further, there may be even more. Oh. Jason, since you've done a good amount of research on this creature, where would you like to begin here? Tell me about this thing. I'm so wanting to know, but where do we begin to understand the Goatman?
So one of the things, while you were talking, it occurred to me, the first one from Maryland, it started in the 1970s. I was just double-checking one thing on when the Pope-like monster was, you know, if there's sort of a set date for it, because there's an interesting point here, and I can't find one. I didn't notice a specific date, because there is a really interesting reason for this. But you mentioned something earlier I want to touch back on, which is it's always a bridge, right? It is literally always a bridge that these creatures are seen at. 9 times out of 10, it's an old iron truss bridge. But it can be other bridges. And the reason I mention that is there is sort of there is a very, very long-standing connection between the paranormal and the occult and river crossings, right? We all think about the legend of Sleepy Hollow, right? And this is, I picked that one for several reasons. But for now, where could the Headless Horseman not go? It couldn't cross over the bridge. It couldn't cross over the running water.
Wonderful.
Rivers, creeks are often described as liminal zones, places where things get a little weird sometimes. And you go all the way back to the Greeks. The Greeks were saying, hey, if you cross a creek or a river, there were certain things you had to do. Otherwise, you could anger the water nymphs and the spirits within the water, right? Or one of the gods nearby. There is a long-standing connection between running water and, again, the occult. And, again, very specifically, bridges. The Billy Goat's gruff. The troll lives under the bridge, you know? There's going back to medieval Europe, and even before and slightly after, there's all kinds of bridges that are called the Devil's Bridge, where a demon of some kind has something to do with this bridge, either to help make it or it haunts it for some reason. And if you look at a lot of these Goatman stories, it is always a iron truss style bridge 9 times out of 10. But again, you get into Maryland, you have sort of these older wooden covered bridges, and you see them there too. But also you hear things, again, Crybaby Bridge. That's literally in every state. Every state has a crybaby bridge. Every state has at least one Goatman bridge. And the stories all seem to have a very similar motif. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Some version of a criminal is executed and by being hanged off of said bridge, and either haunts it because he was an innocent man, or his evil was so great that he still remains in the area. Oftentimes there's a decapitation, either in the hanging or in something to do with the bridge, and that head is either he remains headless or he replaces his head with the goat's head. Or an innocent victim of some crime is executed, often by hanging off of a bridge. Those are the two variants that are the most common, and with these Goatman bridge themes. The one here in Denton, Old Alton Bridge, which is one of the most famous, has several versions of that story. One is a criminal who loses his head because he's hanged by the locals, and he finds a goat, rips its head off, and uses that. The one that's circulated the most now is a black man who raised goats, and his family and him were terrorized by the Klan, and they hanged him, and so now he haunts it and they called him the goat. He had the nickname the Goatman. But the thing is, you can find some version and iteration of that story on all of these things, right? The Poplik monster. It was a circus freak who was hanged off the Iron Trestle Bridge, or others would say it was a criminal and he was decapitated in the hanging.
Or a scientist.
The hanging man. Yeah, or a scientist. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter. The hanging man mythology and being haunted by a man who was hanged on Iron Truss Bridge is found with all of them. Now, the question then becomes, where do these stories come from? Is it that it happened at one bridge and everyone just sort of, because of the paranormal phenomena around maybe these bridges themselves, the story gets supplanted somewhere else? Is it because people did get hanged from these bridges at some point, and so the story metastasizes and grows and changes and evolves? Who knows? But the themes are almost always the same. There's really just one or two or three variants of this story, but we find them in every state, and they're always around bridges. Again, chicken or the egg question, but like the one from Massachusetts, you said started in the 1970s. Well, that is suspiciously after the 1963 event in Texas, which is where sort of the Goatman motif was reborn with essentially what was a Sasquatch sighting. But the name Goatman stuck because it was given by Jim Mars, even though a Goatman was not really described. But the name Goatman stuck, and we see it changed because we had a lot of Sasquatch sightings going all the way back to the 1800s in the North Texas region. But then once the name Goatman was cemented in everyone's brain, the thing that have been, these things have been called the monster, the creature, the howler, right? Those things, it all gets supplanted by Goatman. And now everyone has this idea in their head of, it must be a Goatman. So it must be half man, half goat, like a satyr or fawn. So there's a lot of question as to whether or not, again, chicken or the egg here, right? Which sort of causes it. Because, as you alluded to earlier, the story of a creature that's half human, half goat, particularly with like digitigrade legs, goat-like legs, cloven hooves, go all the way back to the Epic of Gilgamesh. Enkidu, the oldest representation we have of Enkidu, is as a man with horns and bull, the legs of a bull. Like, that's the oldest representation. The Hebrews, the demons in the wilderness that is referred to in the Old Testament, they were called shahadim, which they visualize as hairy goat entities. So this is one of those things where it goes all the way back to the end, but for the modern incarnation of the Goatman theme, it's a near universal, and it's a near universal connected to a lot of these bridges. Almost 70-80% are the Iron Truss bridges that were built at the end of the Civil War and are often used for trains.
Okay. Interesting.
Sort of a lot of information there. I'm sorry.
No. That's good. Jeff, would you like to chime in on some of this too?
Yeah, I'd be curious with those bridges there with the iron and everything, with the water and everything, what the magnetic field around that would look like. But I want to bring it back even farther. What you said, you nailed some things there in the Bible, and we'll go back to Leviticus 16:8. It actually, Azazel, the scapegoat. Right, the Israelites were for atonement. One goat was sacrificed for the people's sin, and the other one, a scapegoat, or in the Hebrew, Azazel, would put the sins on it and send it into the wilderness, a wilderness place.
Yes.
Now, Azazel is also in the book of Enoch. Now, and so he was one of the ones that came down, one of the watchers that taught the people to do war and kill and all this other stuff, and Enoch 15:8, and this is going to lay the groundwork for it. It talks about hell was created for the angels that had sinned, and all the humans that don't accept Christ, they'll also join there. And we know that heaven was created for those that accept Christ. But Enoch writes in book, and you can say you want about the I know it's not canonized, but the book of Jude and Peter both quote it, and the beginning of Enoch, it says it's for a future generation, and it's really coming on scene now and helps to line up a lot of these things that we see. And the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in large portions of the book of Enoch were found, so it's like, wow, so you just see this being put on. But in 15:8 it says that the children of these Nephilim, which Genesis chapter 6 says Nephilim were there before and after the flood, that they there was to wander the deserted places and everything. And in Leviticus 17:7, it says this. It says, so they shall no more sacrifice their sacrifices to goat demons, after whom they go whoring around. So we see it right there lined up, quoted in the Bible. And then we're all familiar with Pan. Of course, it's not the Disney one. He was a satyr as well, Goatman, who would go after lost boys, attack those that were out in the woods there if they could find them, to take them and do things to them. And it's interesting as we see more of the Goatman appearances and stuff, how the Baphomet has come on the scene more and more.
Let's tackle that a little bit later.
About that, okay.
Yeah.
So the Goatman, you just see a history of it, and it's written all the way through it. And so, but I would be very curious about these iron trusses, what the magnetic field would be around those and stuff as the water goes through it. I like that you brought that up.
It also got me thinking too, Jason. It's like there's something about water.
Right.
I mean, and I know we're talking about the Iron Trestle Bridge, but is there some sort of vortex involved in here too? Because we got water, and
Right.
It makes me wonder a little bit more about that. Can you elaborate?
Yes.
So yeah, this is one of those questions a lot of us have been asking for a long time: the connection between flowing water and the paranormal, because it exists. Period. End of story. Now, the question is, again, it almost becomes chicken or the egg. A great example of this is the weird phenomena around Old Alton Bridge. There's a story that the Goatman was summoned. This is one of the third versions of the story, where that he was summoned by a cultist who would meet under the bridge, right?
Okay.
Well, whether that story is true or not, the bridge isn't, because of the story, is now used for occultic practices. We even see it with we have people going out there. They've actually painted several Ouija board, spirit board, material on the actual bridge itself. And so, whether the story was true, it has now become true that it's used for occult practices. But there is a history of occult practices happening at running water. And again, the connection to the bridges, is it a magnetic field thing? Is it somehow that the running water over limestone is somehow generating some sort of ambient electric field that allows supernatural creatures easier access? I don't know. That's entirely speculation. One of my issues with with supernatural phenomena in general, as soon as I know it's on that side of the veil, I'm like, well, I'm out, because we don't have the Spookatron 5000, patent pending, to tell us what these things are, how they operate. A lot of what we have are basic assumptions, and they're assumptions based on our own hubris, right? We're like, well, if they exist, they must exist as some form or somehow emit electromagnetic energy or radiation. Maybe that's true, right? Maybe when they interact, electromagnetic fields are formed and all that. That may be true. Maybe they somehow harness that. Maybe that's all true. But we don't know that it's true, and it's an assumption that we're creating based off of our modern conception of the situation. You went back 1,000 years, they'd say it's because the spirits that govern the water are giving them power, and they would have a completely different conception of how this worked. Both may be entirely wrong. We just may not have a good enough understanding of how reality even works. In the same way that 600 years ago, if you said, hey, you get sick because of microbes and viruses, they would look at you like you were insane, because the idea of creatures and of things like bacteria and viruses, it was not even on their wheelhouse or on the board, because they hadn't invented the microscope yet. We don't have the spookoscope to tell us, what these things are, how they operate. So is it possible that there is something with the running water and the crossing of the... Maybe. It's entirely possible. There's enough history behind it. But again, it goes back to, is the history there because it's a real phenomenon, or are we telling stories? Did we tell the story early enough that we've made the phenomena through our telling, and so that's the framework that we're working from?
That's very powerful.
That's the question.
Yeah. Jeff, go back to... You said that. Did you say this is from the Book of Enoch or the Scriptures itself?
Which part?
When they mention sacrificing to the goat demon.
That's Leviticus. Leviticus 17:7.
Yes.
Okay.
It's the day of it's the Day of Atonement. It's not that they don't sacrifice to the goat demon. There are two goats. One is for God.
The different chapter. This is a different. That's chapter 16. This is chapter 17.
Oh. Yeah.
So this is totally off that. We're past the Day of Atonement. He's going on and he says 17:7 here, and this is King James. So they shall no more sacrifice their sacrifices to goat demons, after whom they have whored around like the other nations. This shall be a statute forever for them throughout the generations.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever... Maybe it didn't resonate with me before.
Right. Yeah, the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia is where I got this out of. They have a huge list of the goat, the history of the goat demon and stuff like that. Is where I got a lot of this information from.
Well, it's kind of like this, Jason, where we see the goat as a symbol of the Satanic Bible or other places as well. And it's like, how profound is that?
Yep.
But it always seems to come back to some sort of a goat or sheep or something like that, almost as if it's a slap on the face to God, because he is the sacrificial lamb.
I hear you. Yeah,
we use the goat. Are they trying to say maybe that the goat is unclean? No, not necessarily. But it's not a lamb.
No.
But it's the opposite. Kind of like when we talked in the past, Jason, where they said numbers are kind of unique with the enemy. They like to twist the numbers that God has. They use it to their advantage of some sort. Something I'm trying to understand as well, but I'm not trying to get off subject or whatsoever, because I easily could do that, of course. But I wanted to ask that because I don't think it just evaded me.
Right.
I didn't know about that one.
Right.
Okay. All right. Before we go any further, let's take a quick break, give a shout out to some of our sponsors here guys. And we're going to come back to the Goatman, and try also to go even further back as where maybe there's some other deeper origins here, darker stuff. So you can be ready with that too. You are listening to Cryptozoological Talk on the RRN Ropin Radio Network. We'll be right back with Jason McLean.
Hey, Safari Guy here from Wildlife Safari. I've traveled all the way to Africa to bring you closer to some of the wildest animals on the planet. Only in Africa can you find this kind of action.
Hey, Safari Guy. This isn't Africa. This is Oregon.
Oh.
At Wildlife Safari, you'll discover a whole new world filled with amazing creatures right in your own backyard. Wildlife Safari, I-5, exit 119 in beautiful Southern Oregon. It's closer than you think.
Hey, can I get a ride?
If you're looking for tactical supplies, look no further than 911 Supply located in Kaiser, Oregon. They have everything from hats, jackets, belts, pants from the 511 brand, and gloves. I got their pair of pants. I used them in Arkansas. Kept me warm the entire time. So the next time you're out looking for your monster, make sure you have the right gear. Gets the job done. 911 Supply for all your tactical needs. We're back on the RRN Ropen Radio Network, broadcasting from the heart of Oregon, Salem's capital, and Salem is listening and watching. We're back with Jason McLean, author of Metroplex Monsters. Been there and done that in a way, because I've seen him at the Oregon Bigfoot Festival. I'm sure you all checked that out as well. And he had one of the best conversations with Tom Bowden of Oregon's MUFON. It was just more in depth. I really enjoyed it. I thought that's why I reached out to Jason and said, "Hey, look, I think your show is actually better than the one on stage." Maybe my biased opinion, but it really was a fascinating conversation. Check that out, by the way. Jason, the power of suggestion seems to come up here when we're dealing with a creature like the Goatman that seems to be a part of these bridges, a part of these water paths. And I wonder why something like this would manifest part goat, part man. Why is it these creatures want to take on this form? And I've asked this question over and over again, that if there's supposedly some sort of thing from the cosmos, why do they represent God's creation in some way? Because if we were created in his likeness, the enemy likes to twist that and create something of its own, which has led people to ask the question about the Goatman. Is it a hybrid? Is it a supernatural entity? Is it ultra-dimensional, metaphysical? I'm at this stage, Jason, where I'm beyond diplomacy and theorizing, because when you have something like this that's intent is to do damage, can we maybe finally narrow this down and come away with what the Bible says it is? Does Scripture point to something? Is there a deep origin where we can look at it from an archaeological standpoint, bring it into fruition, and nail it down? Is there something we can work on from there? What are your thoughts?
So I'm right there with you. Like I said, once I know something's on sort of the paranormal side and it's not an organic, naturally occurring creature, then again, I'm sort of out, because again, we don't have a way of objectively reviewing the creature itself. However, what we can do is say, how does it behave? What are the effects of its behavior? How does it interact with us? And you can conclude easily what it is. The fact that there is this connection between the goat and this weird chimeric appearance, it is very, very clear. And the fact that this has gone on forever, right? The Leshy of Indo-European mythology is this hairy man-goat thing. Not a true satyr the way we would think of it, but still along those lines. Again, the idea of a cloven, hooved, or a hoofed man with animal features, it is this theme that has been there forever, and I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't think it's a coincidence that, again, in Leviticus, when it talks about the scapegoat, the goat that's all sin from Israel is put on and sent out, and that does become a part of the Day of Atonement particularly in the Second Temple period. That's what they would do. It was the goat for Azazel, right? This connection exists throughout the entirety of Scripture, but also through the entirety of humanity. Maybe it's because these things look like that, or maybe it's because they are using this appearance to mock God. Again, chicken or the egg sort of thing. But the simple fact of the matter is, they do seem to have, and at least favor this appearance, right? There's an idea, because we have too many stories of people seeing these things in reality. There is some sort of physicality to them, but they are also willing, they vanish without a trace. They disappear in blinding light. They don't ever seem to actually kill. There are plenty of stories of people dying, either through injuries. People talk about, it was, like the Poplic monster, but others talk about, these things having axes. We don't really have any good evidence of them directly killing people, but we do have people falling from their deaths or committing suicide or other events where people do end up dead. Well, we see that with other demonic entities, period, end of story, right? When a lot of people, when they interact with these demonic creatures, the chances of dying by suicide or mishap infinitely skyrise. To say what this thing is, beyond being able to say it is a supernatural entity that is negatively interacting with us, I'm happy to call it a demon, right? I'm among the people who look at the Book of Enoch and say it may not be scripture, but it clearly expresses the thoughts they had in the Second Temple, because it's not just quoted by Jude and Peter. It's referenced directly by Jesus himself when he calls himself the Son of Man. That is a specific title found within the Book of Enoch for the Messiah. There's other sort of references to it, even in a lot of Paul's writings. If you have the Book of Enoch in your mind, a lot of things make more sense, particularly when he talks about women covering their hair, being for the angels, as a way of saying, hey, don't tempt these things, right? So whether it's scripture or not, it expresses these thoughts and ideas, and we should take them seriously. The simple fact of the matter is, I do think that demons themselves are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, but that is not the end of the supernatural ecology or ecosystem, right? There are other supernatural beings that have authority, they have reasons to exist, that are not on God's side. And I think when you deal with some of these forest spirits, these goat men, that may be exactly what you're dealing with, or something like they are supposed to be guardians of they were supernatural beings set out to oversee those areas and guide us and do the things that all the watchers were supposed to be doing. And they're like, nah, I'm not going to do that anymore. Right.
Yeah.
And now we're coming across that, or perhaps, and this is another theory, again, still supernatural creature, but it takes that form because we've told the stories.
Yeah.
Right. This is one of those things that we need to really stop to think about, is, do our beliefs and our assumptions shape how we perceive these things? Again, I don't want to get too far afield, but a lot of people, I'm not the only one who's noticed, lots of people have noticed things like alien abductions, the truly bizarre ones, are identical to what you had with the Fae and the elves and the Jinn, right? Or you go back, everyone's saying this is it's clearly the same thing, but they seem to take different forms. And our ideas about these creatures, about what these aliens look like, to also shape how how people claim what they look like. Betty and Barney Hill, which everyone says, oh yeah, this is the first time the Greys show up. Not in their original report. Their original report, they don't describe them as Greys. They describe them as having noses, red hair. He thought they were Irish. The gray appearance evolves over time. In fact, a lot of the early UFO alien encounters, you have these very weird looking things. The Hopkinsville goblins look like goblins. So my point, to bring this back to Goatman, again, in the book, when you get beyond the bridge immediately area, or the Goatmen of White Rock Lake, once you get beyond the lake itself, these creatures take a very different form. They do seem to have backwards facing legs, but they look more almost alien-esque. Elongated skulls, long, lanky, proportioned bodies. they stop having the horns and the goat, but they do have that same overall appearance. But
interesting.
Again, is that because of our expectation is placed? This is what it should look like here, and so that's what it appears as. And then once that creature's far enough away from that point, it takes on a very different appearance. The fact that you have in Cedar Hill, you've got Witch Mountain, right? Again, there was a Sasquatch sighting right after or during the whole Lake Worth monster thing. That's why the name Goatman gets attached to that area, and people talk about seeing Goatmen in the area and roads connected to Witch Mountain directly, right? But we also have other clearly supernatural, paranormal phenomena that occur in the area, and sometimes the creatures don't look like Goatman. They do have backwards-facing legs, though. So what do we do from this outside to say the paranormal is weird? It is not part of our natural universe, and we need to stop making a lot of assumptions about how that works. Our preconceived notions of how these things exist may, or the stories that we tell around these areas may be shaping them as much as anything else.
I had wondered about that.
Right.
That was a big question. A lot of people probably ask this. Are we putting too much power into this that's causing these things to manifest and take on this form?
Yep.
Would you say that's about right, Jason?
Yeah. No, I'm very much there. I'm not 100% there, but I'm probably 95% there. I'm 100% that we are interacting with it, and our interactions change how it appears, whether it's causal, or if they're reacting to us as a way of distracting us or hiding, like they're taking on what we assume they should look like as a way of hiding their true identities. I don't know, but there is clearly a causal relationship. But just to take that, again, one step further, a lot of the stories of, well, it copies people that you know, their cries, or they will call out to you. That's a universal warning for people in the woods. Like, hey, if you're traveling a road, and you hear someone say or you hear your name, or you hear someone call out your name, or you hear the voice of someone you know calling for help, do not leave the road. That goes all the way back. People in the Appalachian State say, if you hear this, don't ever leave the road. Now, let me ask one question. We know this, and it's highly connected to the forest. We don't talk about that in cities. We are assuming that these are exclusively connected to bridges and rivers because that's what we're used to. That's where the accounts are coming from. But those are the stories we're telling. What if that lulls us into a false sense of security, and these things happen all the time in the cities, and it's just, oh, it was a mugging gone wrong, or it was a suicide, or it was a whatever. How many people are walking down the streets like, is that Bob? I'll go down this dark alley, and then you end up dead somehow. Accident, or a mugging, or it's a whatever. But no human had anything to do with it. I can't say it is happening, but I think it's something we should definitely consider, because the simple fact of the matter is our opinions, our thoughts we are shaping, they are interacting with us, and that may even be leading us into a false sense of security with how they behave.
Yeah, I agree. Some pretty chilling stuff, for sure.
Sorry. Well, it's a topic that we need to, I would argue, 100 years ago or 200 years ago, people would be like, well, yeah, that's why you don't say their names. Everyone knew. You don't use the name of these creatures. You always had some other stand-in for you. You didn't talk about them. You didn't use their names. There were protocols for this, even within the Christian church. It's like, yeah, of course these things are real. It was assumed that they were real. There was, again, how to behave. You put you put scriptures over your houses. There were ceremonies that were done to, and it was a part of everyday life. But over the last 100 years, we're too advanced for those superstitions. And those superstitions, and we kicked all of that out, and now we've made ourselves vulnerable. I think, going back to one of the original questions, right, was the lizard man. Was she attacked because she was doing something wrong? maybe a lot of these assaults aren't because you're engaged in some sin or some kind of behavior. It may just be you're exposed because you're not taking the proper precautions. You leave food out on the counter, you're going to get ants. Demonic entities are like ants.
Yeah.
You leave yourself open. I'm sorry, that's what happens. And the worst part is, and I actually was literally having a conversation today about this. When you deal with the supernatural as a Christian, if you are offered something and you accept, all bets are off, because now the protection that God gives you is gone, because you've now invited that entity into your life, and it's got free will to do whatever it wants to do to you because you agreed to it.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous concept that I don't think we fully understand. And it may be a big part of this whole mess. Like, why is it that Bigfoot shows and these paranormal shows are everywhere to invite, which are getting people to go out and, again, where's the line between research and worship? That's a question I ask all the time. But one other question is, literally people are like, hey, it's a great idea. Let me go grab my camera and some EM meters, and I'll go run out to this abandoned, bridge. And I'm going to be like, here, ghosty, here, spiritual being, can you talk to me? Our ancestors would look at us like we were in freaking sane.
Right?
They're like, are you trying to get dead? Because that's how you get dead, right?
Yeah.
Are we empowering these creatures by even telling these stories the way we're telling them? How much are they manipulating us to tell these stories, to give them power, to give them worship in a way? I don't know the full answer to that. Again, these are chicken or the egg questions. The broader point may just be, understand they exist. There's a protocol for not interacting with these things, and then don't interact with them, because that gives them power, and that power can be used to hurt you and other people.
This is why I've emphasized back in the day when I was involved in parapsychology, it is a dangerous, dangerous field, because these things can follow you, especially if you're not saved. That's how I feel about it. Okay.
Absolutely.
100%.
So I warn as a caution. I know that sounds like an intriguing field and you really are excited by it, but it's a dangerous, dangerous one. It's not like this. It's worse. And these things literally will manifest in front of you, which I've had that happen. Not with the lizard and not with the reptilian. It was another case. And stupid me, I did that back in the day. And the ramifications of it are tremendous.
Yes.
They inflict damage. Jason, I know we're running a little short on time here, and I want to be able to keep going with you as much as I can. Tell me about Lake Worth. I don't think I'm familiar with the Goatman out there. You've, when you chronicled some of these stories in your book, there's multiple things involving Lake Worth and some other ones too. That it's mentioning it as more of a demon creature of some sort, but it's still affiliated with the Goatman in some way. Tell me more about this Lake Worth area.
So this goes back to that whole point of stories overlapping and changing and evolving and that kind of thing. Very quickly, so North Texas has the Trinity River, and it's essentially 4 different forks that around South Dallas basically all blend into one larger river that goes all the way out to Galveston Bay. It's basically the reason life even exists in North Texas, because that's the water. We don't have lakes naturally. We've created lakes by damming up these rivers. White Rock Lake is one of them, and Lake Worth is one of them. It's one of the earlier ones. So originally, the Lake Worth monster, a lot of us believe that it was originally a Bigfoot sighting, because we have numerous people seeing it. And particularly when everyone was going out there to look for it, like this was a big deal. This is 1963. Radio and television are television's brand new. So people are like, well, Jim Mars is reporting on it. So everyone's like, hey, let's go check this out. Dozens of people, including police officers, are attacked by the Sasquatch because it yells at them and throws it and takes a tire and chucks it at the people. Everyone scatters, including the cops, right? Well, here's the thing. While I was researching that, I noticed that that there were other Goatmen, Old Alton Bridge, it's the Goatman Bridge. That's the most famous one. White Rock Lake, that's the Goatman. There's also a woman in white there, right? But I noticed there was, again, I knew Cedar Hill. I was like, wasn't anyone talking about the Cedar Hill Goatman? And I found one in Johnson County, Old Soapy. But I started looking at all this, and as I started looking at all the stories sort of side by side, I'm like, these are the same story. They're all the same story. And they're all lifting stuff from Jim Mars's, at least most of it is being lifted from Jim Mars's earlier articles, and then other aspects of each one sort of evolves on their own. But the idea that this is a creature with red glowing eyes, again, that's a pretty common universal, and it'll throw tires at trash, including tires at people. You can hear the sound of crying or braying goats in the area. Like it's every single one of where there's Italy, Texas, and it is pronounced Italy, not Italy, even though it's how it's spelled. It's Italy, you know. But you start looking like, okay, all these stories are identical. What's going on here? And why are people saying that they see? And you get past the what people say they see and then what people report. Yeah. And that's when you notice this is exclusively a paranormal phenomena. Again, the name, there were instances where people did see at least what appears to be a Bigfoot, and there's reasons for them to be in Lake Worth and migrating using the Trinity River system in the Mountain Creek and all these things to migrate from the Fort Worth area, from the wooded areas in Fort Worth out to East Texas. Or I know a lot of people think, oh, it's Texas, it's dry, and it is. But it's not a desert, particularly North Texas. It's part of the plains, but we've got trees. You know, in fact, my theory of the green wall comes from living in the area. I'll speed up a little bit here, but long story short, it looks like this Bigfoot and this long-standing Bigfoot phenomena in the area has evolved through the telling of the Goatman story into these other things. But there's a wrinkle to it because the one at Old Soapy out in Johnson County, and this ties into the idea of Old Alton Bridge being used as an occult meeting place. Old Soapy is literally, there's this little bridge, this little creek. It got the name of Old Soapy because somebody was dumping something into that river, and it would get all foamy and sudsy at the bridge, where it was because there was this drop off. So people it looked like soap. That's gone now. But it's like, guys, I don't know what the heck y'all were putting in the water, but you should probably stop if it's like, hey, there's a giant foam mound over there. But so people would go out there, and of course, this, again, all of these stories are the same. The teenagers would go out there in their brand new cars, and they'd turn off the car, they'd flash the light 3 times, or honk 3 times, or you knock 3 times, right? All of these bridge stories have the same 3 times. Well, that goes back to the Greeks too. So it's a very old story. Again, cause relation, who knows? And then, of course, the creature is supposed to jump out at you, jump on your car, scratch it up. Well, that's what literally happened at Lake Worth. It's the same story, except they weren't flashing. This creature just came out of nowhere. But now they're like, oh, if you do that, it'll come and mess up your car. And I'm like, why would you want a demon creature to mess up your car? But that's teenagers for you, right? However, several of these accounts have someone showing up with like a goat-headed mask, and these people punch it, and as they're driving, they're seeing people align the side of the roads all wearing cloaks. One of the most now again, maybe the story's real, maybe it isn't, but here's the thing that is absolutely real. And I have talked to people high placed within the Dallas Fort Worth Police Department region. Dallas and Fort Worth are 2 different police departments. I'm just in the area, in the whole Metroplex area. I've spoken with people, and I've asked this question because I started noticing things. And if you spent any time as a kid going out to certain locations, you found occult material pretty quick. It wasn't hard to find it.
Yeah.
As someone who's worked in real estate as a title officer, when I was doing REOs, being properties that were foreclosed on, they were vacant, they were being resold, it wasn't uncommon for them to be broken into and used as a drug house, right? That was pretty common. But something that happened a lot less frequently but did happen is you would find occultic material. And this occultic material isn't just a bunch of teenagers who are like, I'm going to draw a pentagram because I'm being rebellious against my Southern Baptist dad. I mean real occult material, actual sacrifices, runes, and other sigils that are being used properly. I asked all of my contacts, I said, look, I'm just going to ask this one question. Just say yes or no. Is there at least one, if not more, active, very powerful cults in the area, and that they do perform at least animal, if not human, sacrifices? Every single one of them said 100%. They're like, we see it all the time. This stuff's happening all the time. And I think that's been here. I think one of the dirty secrets about the Salem witch trials is that there were actually witches. I think some of these older religions, with the coming of Christianity, they went underground. They will be at churches on Sunday, and they'll sing the songs, and they'll be, hey, sister, whatever, and brother, whatever. But afterwards, they're out there sacrificing goats, and they gather in secret places in the woods to perform these rituals. Yeah. And it's been an underlying thing the entire time. They would go out on the front because they're looking for places to practice these things in secret. So again, it goes back to why do we see goatmen? Maybe that is what these creatures actually look like. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's something we're putting on them. Maybe it's not. But maybe it's because the people worshiping these creatures expect them to look like that, and that's giving them the form. Again, maybe the fact that Baphomet looks the way it does is not a coincidence.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And why you could say why Krampus isn't a coincidence either, or the Pan.
Right.
Yeah. It goes way back. So when these things are happening, they're conjuring these things, these spirits. I'm going to say, a lot of people hate it when we use the word demon, Jason. We get a lot of flack for that. But the first thing I want to ask someone is this. What do you believe? Where is your foundation? Are you a Christian? If you're not, then you may not buy into what we're saying here. Okay? So you'll think that these things may be for you when they're actually against you. Okay? Because we're warned, as believers, we're warned to stay away from it. Okay? But to expose them. All right? But for those who are not studying or reading Scripture or following, this is a trap. And they're falling for it, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. They're being pulled in. And these creatures are manifesting because we're calling them out. My parents used to live in Texas. They would tell me about certain things that would happen on Saturday nights way back in the day. Yep. They would conjure spirits. And these things are manifesting into goatmen, I guess you could say. Yep. Yeah?
Yeah.
Wow. Good stuff. Did you go out to these parts, Jason? Did you go out to these areas and speak with eyewitnesses? There's certain things we're limited. We have to say, okay, look, we're dealing with a supernatural presence potentially here, a very powerful one. Did you venture out to those areas, those locations?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Okay. Now, the thing is, finding eyewitnesses is hard, but I did find one. And he actually came to me. He was someone I'd known for a while. And he's like, yeah, let me tell you the story about White Rock Lake that happened in the 80s. So it happens before the Sandra James story that everyone knows about White Rock Lake. So it's like, yeah, I doubled the amount of actual data that we have by one, whatever, you know. And I did that with a couple of these creatures where it's like, you know, I actually have another eyewitness that we didn't know about. Well, that's data that we need. But the simple fact of the matter is I've been to all these areas. I went out there, took photographs, I walked around, I talked to people. Again, the thing is, these do seem to be slightly rare, or fairly rare. But the thing is, I didn't have to look as hard as you would imagine to find people who did have encounters. Again, of the people who would speak to me directly and say, yes, I had this encounter, one was at White Rock Lake, and he said, yeah, it was a group of people, and they saw him. Dude had horns, goat legs, whole 9 yards, freaked them out, they ran away. The other sightings around White Rock Lake, each one happened within a 2-mile radius of White Rock Lake, but also off of one of the tributaries, right? The creature looks very different. It's the same height, but it becomes spindly. It has backwards facing legs. Same thing with the Old Alton Bridge. About a quarter of a mile down, literally like less than a quarter of a mile down the road, someone sees a creature crossing the road, and it's only 5 feet tall, but it has backward-facing legs, big eyes, sort of weird-looking elongated head. It starts looking almost alien. So it goes back to maybe none of these things are what we think they are, right? Maybe meaning, oh, it's a goat man, it's a dog man, maybe this applies to a lot of the Bigfoot sightings or gargoyle sightings or whatever. We are assuming we're seeing what they look like because we see them with our eyes, and that's what we're used to. That's how we're used to understanding the universe. But maybe that's not what they're actually seeing. Maybe we're just seeing what they want us to see or what we assume we should be seeing. And that may be because if you don't have the goat man thought in your head, it's like, fine, I can't appear as a goat man, but I can appear as this thing, right? Or, again, Slender Man, right? Not to get too off point, but Slender Man, we know it's fake lore. We know when he was created, and yet as soon as his story was popularized, people started seeing him. Is it because that's in our head, or is that just the outline of a tall, slender figure with an elongated skull? Is that sort of a cultural universal? Because maybe that's sort of like the default form for these things, and they change to fit our assumptions. Who knows?
Let me jump on this, Jason. So being that, if they manifest this way, they're saying, hey, look, another idiot. Let's lure more in. Because if this one comes looking and realize it's a Slender Man or a Goat Man or whatever, we'll manifest like that again. And we've got another one that we can lure. It's a dangerous thing, dangerous game that we're kind of playing here.
This is literally the origin of my what's the line between worship and research.
One person says, "Hey, look, I saw this. It's real," and this spirit is getting wind of this and is starting to just manifest again and again and again. And that's I've always asked that question. I've been saying, "Okay, look, why are you mad? If you're a fallen being, Satan was the angel of light.
Yep.
Is he still the angel of light when he appears?" He might have appeared to Joseph Smith because the guy didn't have discernment.
Right.
He just fell for it. So in this case, these things are appearing like a monster. Is that because it's just more appealing to us? Or they just have no choice but to represent it, even though their true form, maybe that is their true form, but the way they see themselves is different from how we see them.
Right. We don't know which ones we're necessarily dealing with. Are we dealing with demons, or are we dealing with something bigger and badder? Are they choosing the form? Are we choosing the form? Like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, right? Are we choosing?
That's a good analogy. I like that.
Yeah.
Are we choosing the form, or is it something along the lines of before they started making the remakes, the last, I think it was called The Last Nightmare, right? For the Freddy Krueger series. Where it's literally a movie within a movie within a movie, but it was designed to kill this demon. And the basic plot for a 30-year-old film, I'm sorry if I'm giving you spoilers, still worth watching.
Like we're going to watch it.
Is that yeah, exactly. Is that there was this demon. Wes Craven is in the movie. He's as the screenwriter. As Wes Craven himself, as the person who wrote the original story, right? He's saying, look, there's a demon that exists within stories, and as long as we tell these stories, it's trapped within the story. Right. The climax, when the woman, the hero, fights Freddy one last time, you see elements of all of these stories that we've told throughout history. It's, there's a gingerbread house, and then it's Freddy's face on a snake creature, right? There's this idea. It goes back to saying the name of the creatures. You don't say their name because it attracts them. It brings them to you. Exactly, Candyman, or Bloody Mary, or any of these things, right? There is a connection between our thoughts, our words, our behaviors, and what these things do. Again, are they trapped like that because we think they should look like that? Do they want us to think they look like that? Is it, again, we know there's a causal relationship. What the full nature of it isn't understood, but I think we get lost often. With a lot of this, we tend to get lost in the minutia, and we should just say, look, who cares what the actual causal relationship is? There is a causal relationship. Let's stop talking about meaning, like let's stop using their names. Let's stop going out there Perhaps we should start being wiser about how we're interacting with this material, with this phenomena, because it can lead to total destruction.
Not just for us,
but most
the viewer, but also the person who goes out looking for it.
Precisely. I'm here to tell you, man, a lot of cryptozoologists, a lot of people who are in this field, even the paranormal people, they're not here for this conversation at all. I'm like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing this stuff. It's like, no, we need the science. We need the research. And I'm like, but you don't know that you ain't, again, you don't have the technology to observe these things. You think you do, but that's your assumption. People for every century, it's like, here's this new thing. Here's a divining fork. Here's a mirror. Here's a silver plate with water in it. At every point in history, there was some new technology that we thought would allow us to understand the supernatural, and it's always turned out to be just another way for them to screw with us.
Yep.
That's
the
it.
Ouija board, right?
Yep.
Hey, Jason, can I ask you a question? And so you brought up some,
No.
man, it's like on the same frequency. But my thing is, you're right. And all throughout the beginning of mankind, every culture, there's something there. It's just like we were talking about earlier, the flood. It's in every different culture through every land and everything. So obviously it happened. So my question is I agree 100% what you're saying, and I believe that we're given these powers to manifest and come stronger. With that being said, and I know we can go out and speak till we're blue in the face, quit giving it power, quit talking about it, don't you name. How do we, Christians and people that are aware of this, like yourself, how do we fight against this in our community, in our culture? What is the proper tactics, in your opinion?
That is a great question, and honestly, this is where I'm going to go with it. I'm trying to figure that out myself, because I have the fear that the genie's out of the bottle, right? Too many people are too enamored by these things, and I mean, they're selling witch starter kits at Target and all these other places, right? I mean, I'm sorry. The genie's out of the bottle. We no longer live within the protections that the Christian world sort of provided for the last 1,000 years. Like, a lot of people sort of assumed that, we got so safe from the paranormal because of Christendom that people assumed it wasn't real. And as we've become less Christian, we've opened ourselves up, and I think the cat's out of the bag. So I'm honestly trying to figure that out myself, because again, 100 years ago, the church itself threw all this away. They threw all this entire worldview away, which is what allowed us to get here. So I don't know that I have a perfect answer beyond protect your home, protect your own soul, and don't do stupid things, right? I mean, I don't think we can... we can't even get people to stop drinking and driving. I don't know that we're going to get them to stop summoning Baphomet. All alcohol is doing is giving you a good time. Baphomet's like, I'll give you power and riches if you sacrifice people to me, and enough people seem to think it works. So I mean, I think that cat's out of the bag. So
and it doesn't help that Hollywood glamorizes this as good, and Christian is the enemy. You know,
yes,
the kids are just lapping it up. Generations.
Oh, it's 100%. In fact, I know we're coming to the end, so let me put a question in everyone's head and let it percolate, because this will ruin your night. What if the reason they keep putting this real occult stuff in movies and television shows, where it's not just fantasy magic, like the first Doctor Strange, but the reason, like in the second one, they have, like, there's stuff in there that's real, like you can feel it, is because by watching it and hearing it, you become a part of the actual ritual, making you vulnerable to it. And if you don't know enough to be like, whoa, something's wrong, I need to cleanse myself, I need to pray, I need to do some stuff to get rid of this stuff, you're now completely open to it. Maybe the entire reason Baphomet literally shows up in television shows made by Disney and Netflix and all these things is because they're trying... Why occult symbolism is used in rituals that we have for the Super Bowl and the opening of other sports events, is because these are real, actual occult events, but because you're watching, you now become a participant in it, which now leaves you open to it.
That's right.
Amen. I think he nailed it right there.
Good. It's a whole nother show.
Yeah.
Well, this is why I love having Jason on the show, because he brings another perspective that I have all these questions, and sometimes it's really hard to express that and to have them answered. But at least I can come to a good, solid conclusion. When you have other believers in your circle, they can aid you during these times. 100%. Last thing, before I let you go, sir.
No problem.
Are we doing the right thing by talking about it? Because I mentioned I want to expose it for what it is. Mm-hmm. I would say this is not like going after a ropen. This is not like going after an extinct animal, presumed to be extinct animal. This is a demonic being, powerful.
Yes.
And you do not tempt the Lord thy God. Your thoughts?
So that's a question I'm asking myself a lot. I really am. It's like, where do we draw the lines? Because at some point we have to interact with the culture that we're in. Like I said, the culture is no longer Christian as a majority, as far as its worldview and understanding and practices. So like I said, it may be the genie's out of the bag, or out of the bottle, so to speak. Cat's out of the bag. Genie cat is out of the bottle bag. And so we may not be able to, like, we may just have to deal with this fact. And then, again, we protect ourselves. We put on our armor. We protect our homes, right? And there's steps we can take for that. But that we have to interact with the culture. It's like, guys, you're seeing this. You're interacting with this. It ain't what you think it is. And we do need to call that out. So I think at the end of the day, we do need to address it. What is the safest way to address it? I think at this point, there's no way but to not call a spade a spade. Right? And I think if we protect ourselves, as long as we're not inviting these things into our lives, I think we're fine. And if we're not the scripture very clearly calls out the gods of the area. They may use other, whatever the Hebrew name, when they talk about Leviathan, that's if in Psalms and in Isaiah, not Job. Job's a real creature. That's a whole other episode. But they're using Leviathan as the stand-in for Tiamat. Right, and we see that throughout the scriptures. We see them reference the Baal, which is even that's more of a not really a proper name per se for the. It's just their way of talking about it. But they address them directly. They did address these things. We need to do the same, or we are allowing people to destroy themselves through ignorance.
Well said, Jason. I appreciate your time. Thank you for being on the Ropen Network. As always, I look forward to our next chat.
I appreciate you, Jake. You too.
It's a pleasure getting to meet you, Jason.
Pleasure meeting you, Jeff.
Sound of Freedom is one of those films that can legitimately change this world. So we want to ignite a fire in audiences and open their eyes to the dark reality of millions of children that need our help. Let's make this film a historic event and the start, the end of child trafficking. Theaters across this country are already selling out. Pre-order your tickets today, and you can send the message that God's children are no longer for sale.
Back. You were listening to the RRN Ropen Radio Network, broadcasting from the heart of Oregon. Salem is listening. This is one of those subjects that is extremely spooky, creepy, whatever you want to call it. That's what cryptozoology is sometimes. But it's also a field that's amazing. When you're talking about reptiles that are extinct, such as the Ropen Kangamato in Dava, they're out there, and they've been seen all over the United States and other parts of the world as well. That was not our subject today, though. Our subject was the Goatman. My personal opinion, a demonic being that you should not go looking for. And I want to reiterate that. It's one thing to go looking for an amazing creature that is extinct. They can kill you too, okay? So I don't recommend going alone. But going after an entity, a potential powerful entity supernatural, demonic, unclean spirit. People don't like hearing that word. Tough. You're setting yourself up for dangers. And I've always been told, don't tempt the Lord thy God. All right? He's on your side. He's for you. But if you're going to go out of the realm of his protection deliberately, you're not going to like what you find. Joining with me today is Jeff Carone, my fellow brother in Christ, as we try to put some perspective on this subject of the Goatman. Not just the Pope Lick monster, the Lake Worth Goatman, or even Maryland's axe-chopping monster. No, this can actually potentially go further back. We touched on that briefly, and that was Gilgamesh. Jason mentioned this in the past, and it's been mentioned by my friend here as well. But I'm hoping that we can understand it a little bit deeper, because every time I hear the word, I always keep thinking about a brewery here in Salem, which is not the case. It's not a brewery. Jeff, enlighten me. What do you know about Gilgamesh?
Gilgamesh, I believe that is, he was Nephilim. So Gilgamesh, it was a time of Nimrod, and these are obviously extra biblical sources found in Sumeri and Sumerian. They found it, and so you always got to take everything with a grain of salt, but it matches up a lot with what was going on. So Nimrod was a mighty hunter before the Lord. It's when things were split in the earth. That's when Peleg, in fact, that's what his name means, the division, the splitting. And so he had rebelled against the Lord. They wanted to make a tower to reach into the heavens. Now, they were very intelligent. They didn't actually think they were going to build a structure that went into heaven. But if you go to the book of Jubilees, other extra biblical sources, the thought was that we are going to get up there and wage war with God. I mean, how arrogant must a man be? And so the evidence there is that he came across pre-flood technology, and the Bible does say that the Nephilim were there before and after the flood. And so the story goes that he became part Nephilim, and he was actually deified, and that his body was actually buried in the Euphrates River, which I don't want to get too, but jump too far ahead there yet. But so he brought in all those different acts of worshiping deities and all this other stuff that led to try to go up to battle God himself. That's when this Goatman, the legends there started in, and you can come on board. And that's where what we were talking about earlier was in Leviticus 17:7 about God commanding that the Israelites no more worship this goat god. So there is a clear line that goes from one point to the next. Nimrod, Gilgamesh, is when the Babylonian system really first came on board up there in the Iraq region, and all the way through the end of worshiping, bringing these old gods back. So
I see. Okay. So this creature, or this image of this creature in some ways, goes all the way back to the ancient world. Okay. I had wondered about that, and I assumed that was the case, but it also has been mentioned in other things as well when it comes to deity worship. Such the case, well, before I get there, how do I pronounce this properly? Is it Baal or Baal?
Well, I've heard it both ways, but I say Baal.
Baal? Okay.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting that Baal is this creature, or is something totally different?
Something different. Baal just means Lord, and so there's Baal Peor, and there's lots of different Baals. It's the first title. I think it would almost be like a pharaoh, Pharaoh, yeah. Teuton, Pharaoh, all this stuff. But
before he was Baal, he was Nimrod.
No.
That's something else?
No, yeah. Baal is the actual deities. Nimrod was a human being that became part Nephilim. Baal is Lord of the Flies. He was actually like what he worshipped.
Okay.
That's, yeah.
Yeah. Good clarification. All right. So we know a little bit more about the Book of Enoch. We know a little bit more about Gilgamesh. You look at throughout history what has been presented. And I consider this Pan character from Greek mythology. Some would say, well, it's just a harmless character with horns. Have you ever thought about what the Pan represents? It actually represents sex. This is a creature that would constantly go after because he had a sexual appetite. Now, I wonder if he went after children, or is it just women? Your thoughts on that, Jeff?
So Pan and Pan's grotto, there in Israel, his grotto, they would actually take babies and smash them against the walls of the caves. So, child sacrifice was definitely involved in the bloody innocence.
This is to this Pan creature.
Peter Pan, yeah, the one that Disney brought up. In fact, he is talking about him that they made it because if you look at the little necklace that Peter Pan wears with the little flute, that was his symbol. And so Pan was a satyr, however you want to pronounce it, but half goat, half man, right? And he would go after lost boys in the woods. If he found young men lost in the woods, he would take them and rape them. And look at the cartoon there was Peter Pan and his lost boys.
They tried to
They brought it over and made it innocent.
Yeah, I was going to say make a wholesome entertainment.
Right, but
there's always an origin to something, isn't there?
There sure is, yes.
Yeah, as disturbing as it is. Yeah, and the reason I bring that up because if you want to infiltrate a civilization, where do you meet them at the core? You attack the children. Infiltrate the children, change their thinking. Do you also try to disarm them as well? Take away their ability to fight back. Okay. That's what the English did to the Scottish. They took away their weapons. They couldn't train with weapons, so they had to train with stones. All right? The infiltration, attack the children, change their thinking completely. Get them off of God, get them onto the worldly ideas. And now you've created a different society. One that will be more inclined to worship these false deities. And I've seen this throughout history. They just continue to lift these other things up because you mention Yahweh and they think, oh, we don't want to be controlled. Who's controlling you? He's giving you a choice. You either follow the one true God or you don't. These rules are in place to help you, not to hurt you, as he was doing to his people to govern them and protect them. But unfortunately, like a generation comes and goes, we forget who we are and we disobey. If they would have just continued to listen, I wonder where we'd be right now. It'd be a completely different place. But that's another story. And you think about what the Greeks are doing here. You've got these creatures that they portray, like centaurs, Goatman of some sort. They were kind of on the right page, weren't they? If you want to look at what the Greeks are doing right here when it could pertain to this field, they're actually bringing these things out for you to notice, as if someone's saying, hey, look, there's something to this. But foolishly, we just kind of push it aside because that's just Greek mythology. But there's something to it. As me and Jeff had been talking beforehand, it's got to come from somewhere. These ideas, these concepts, they're not just wonderfully created out of thin air. Okay? When you're working on a project, I understand you get ideas that helps make the project even better. Where do those ideas come from? From your own or something else? Depending on the person you are as well. Something to really consider. And then when you have these different cultures around the world, in Turkey, this one's going to throw you for a loop, folks. You know, people are really fond of elves, aren't they? Especially around the month of December. You know what the elf really represents? A goat man. That's the original source. And in Turkey, they celebrate this. If the children have been naughty, they bring out these goat men-like monsters that terrorize the children, scaring them to death, tormenting them. This is based on their history, and it's called the Krampus monster. It's been popularized by Hollywood, and they made it into a movie. Okay, more entertainment. But no one wants to tell you this is what people actually believe. This is what they follow. But how can we Christianize that too? Oh, let's just make them into cute, cuddly elves. It's not the way it works. You cannot take something that wasn't meant to be good and Christianize it. Okay? It's not for you to touch. But they did it anyway. So, you see where I'm going here. We have depictions of this creature throughout history. Now we have another one, too, that comes to mind, and that's Moloch. This is probably the worst I've heard of because they are literally sacrificing children to appease this deity, this false god. And some would say it's just a statue. I think they were actually seeing this being, kind of like we see the Goatman today. But they would sacrifice their children, burning them. And you know what they do? The crowd would get louder to silence the cry of the child. Think about how horrible that is. And you know what? We're still doing it today. Yeah, you don't want me to say the word, do you? But maybe I should say it anyway. I'm not afraid to do this on my network. It's called abortion. We're still sacrificing children. Blood is being spilled. I could get off topic, and maybe I will for just a slight moment. Christians out there have told me in Scripture, there's places where you can find that abortion is allowed. Jeff, what say you?
I say that's absolutely ridiculous and almost blasphemous. They're referring to in the Bible when what they're trying to take out of context there is that when a husband suspected their wife of cheating, they were to take him to the priest and put some dust in the water, and if they had cheating, they'd get cramps and pains down there. Nowhere in that scripture does it say that she was pregnant and they thought it was somebody else's kids. No one. That's reading into it, number one. But God says he knew you before you were in the womb, and that it would be better if a millstone was tied around your neck and you were capped in the depths of the sea than hurt these other ones. It goes absolutely, that one scripture they're trying to take out of context goes absolutely against every other word in the Bible. And again, I would say when it's talking about infidelity of the woman, nowhere in it does it say she was pregnant and he's like, oh, there's no. It just says he thought she had cheated. Nothing about her being pregnant. And to say otherwise, no. It really gets me worked up because it goes against all the other things of the Bible about how life is protected, how you are a human being before you're in the womb. This is what the Bible says. Before you were in your mother's womb, I knew you.
That's something I really take to heart. How about this? Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed is the seed of thy womb. So he knew before she knew. That should resonate with a lot of people, but it's not. It's not.
I didn't catch that one either. You're absolutely right. When the angel Gabriel came, already knew. Yes. Yeah. I missed that one. That's another good one. Yep.
Yeah, and I have to bring this up because it's associated with worshiping of a false god and sacrificing children to this god. And as much as that sounds awful to today's society, the burning of a child before the altar of a fallen angel, we're still doing this, behind closed doors. We don't want to make it public because we see the horrors of it, the real horrors of it, if it's brought out. And I have to expose the darkness, don't I? That's the key on this network. What I see here, folks, is the rising of the old gods.
Yes.
Something is happening in our culture. I got a neat message from a subscriber. I've mentioned this before. I don't know the algorithms of YouTube. If you guys know it, let me know because I'm baffled by it sometimes. I had a wonderful person send me a link to a video. And it shows, you know what? I'm just going to play this one, if I can. Bear with me.
New York City has just erected a golden demon statue on top of a courthouse near Madison Square Park. And when I say a golden demon statue, I'm not being hyperbolic or funny. It is a gold statue of a demon woman with horns on her head and weird tentacle things for arms, dedicated to Ruth Bader Ginsburg and specifically to Ginsburg's support for abortion. The artist who made it told the New York Times that the statue is part of a, quote, urgent and necessary cultural reckoning underway as New York reconsiders traditional representations of power in public spaces and recasts civic structures to better reflect 21st century mores. The libs and the artists see this as a wonderful thing. The horns on the beast are, according to the reports, meant to symbolize autonomy and sovereignty. Nice enough sounding values, at least until you think about what they really mean. But that is...
In a nutshell. You know what? They're giving way to what the book of Revelations has said. The beast forming. Now, is this to be taken literally? Or is this erected statues that look like the beasts of what we discuss? Do you see what's happening in our culture? This is accepted because, I hate to say it, the church isn't doing its job. And this is the direct result. Now your children are being attacked. They're being attacked in schools. They're being attacked in stores. Target? Yeah. This is an alarming rate. I've never seen it move so fast. But you see the depictions here. Horns, horns, horns. Demonic beings. Goatman. It just continues. And when I look at this list from Pope Lick of all the people who have lost their lives, they're young. Savannah Bright, 15, 2019. Raquel Bain, 26, 2016. Nicholas Jewell, 19, 2000. James Ratterman, 35, 1994. John K. List, 1985. John Fleshman, 20, 1984. Let me pause for a moment. It's always painful to hear about someone who loses their life young. You know, the wages of sin is death. And when you go looking for something you shouldn't look for, this is what can follow. And that's a warning for me as well. Okay? I can be just as guilty. Does that suggest that these young ones are doomed? No. That's not what I'm implying. Salvation is for all who accept and for choosing, who choose the one true God. But there's atonement, you know? Just like, for instance, when a man has committed a murder and he's truly guilty, can he become saved? Absolutely. But there's atonement for what you've done. And that's probably the death penalty. Where he goes after that is not for you and I to say. Only God has the power there. And every human being, we want to be saved. Okay? A little off subject there, but it was necessary.
Can I add one more thing? We talk about innocent life and stuff. I just feel it's really important for me to, number one, we were asked to carry the baton and send it forward. I don't know if you or any of your audience has had the chance to see Sound of Freedom yet, but see it, folks. $200 million last, was it 200 million, in sex trafficking right now. I'm trying to get this right. Right now, it's the number 2 illicit money maker. It's the sex trafficking of our babies. As young as 6 years old. This movie was so powerful. It was so impactful, and it was true. And America is the number 1 consumer of innocent young lives and kids. And sometimes you can feel so hopeless and like, what can I do when I look around? I see things falling apart, and sometimes, but I'm here to say, don't feel hopeless. Rest assured, because greater who's in us and he that's in this world. And this isn't a time to feel beaten and trodden, but to get up and stand up. You're listening to my brother's channel here, which means that you think a lot alike if you're hearing this, and we need each other. Right? We need each other, and we need to fight together for our future generation, because these kids, too young, and it just seems to get younger and younger, the ones that are preyed on and the ones that are taken from us. And so I just want to encourage you as we talk about all this, it's not hopeless. It's not, because we're the remnant. We're the remnant.
Yes.
We can do this.
Yeah, it's I'm glad you brought that up, because I did endorse that movie. It's a powerful movie. It'll hit you right in the gut. Yeah, and if you'd like to know how you can help, go to ourrescue.org. That's OURrescue.org, and learn how you can help stop child trafficking. Now, I know that YouTube is probably going to censor me on this. I don't care. This has the right to be heard. This is a real thing. It's a real problem. If you haven't seen the movie, go see it. It is just life-changing. I highly recommend it. Jeff, allow me to follow up on this one just for a little bit, okay? After what Jason had gone through and what he had said, there's a lot of things that resonate with me. And for the most part, I do agree with them. But allow me to do my due diligence, okay? When it comes to the creature known as the Goatman, I understand that some people would prefer to take, a different angle on this and just follow up on the stories, maybe the accounts of people who have died. And that's fine. But for us, I'm really glad that we took a more profound approach here. Jason brings up some key points about water and bridges. Now, I believe, for no doubt, there are vortexes and there are portals all over this earth. Good example of that is Skinwalker Ranch. Just look at that place. So that should tell you there is a connection between water and land, not just bridges, but land as well. If you have friends in parapsychology, something that I was a part of for a while, found to be a little difficult, and it may be difficult for you to explain this to them, but I think it's important what Jason said is a key point, that we expose it, right? That we call them out on it as well, from a friendly way, a friendly demeanor. What I mean by that is, what exactly is their goal here as a parapsychologist? Is it just to study the phenomena? Or are we supposed to be casting out evil spirits? I, for one, think we're supposed to be casting them out. For instance, there's a great part in Acts 19, 11 through 17. Now, these supposed exorcists, Pharisees, thought they could do what Paul could do. Well, when they tried their hand at that, the demon looked at them and said, Jesus I know, and Paul I know, but who are you? You know what that means? They couldn't exorcise the demon because they didn't have a walk with God. They just thought they could perform an act without knowing the truth behind it and having that fellowship with their Savior before doing it. So you see, it's all meaningless. If you think as a medium and as an exorcist that you can cast these spirits out and not be grounded in your faith, think again. What's going to happen is they're going to come back with reinforcements. They're just going to chuckle, and they're coming back. So from a friendly way, it is important that we let our fellow brethren know that if you're going to be a parapsychologist, let's make sure you're in it for the right reason. This is where it's a problem because we have people conjuring up these spirits in the world, and we're trying to eradicate them. The more times we eradicate them, they just keep coming back because these guys are out there forming cults, performing seances, and bringing them back out into the world. Not long ago, I watched a program that had a gentleman in Texas, San Antonio, who was calling upon the Lechuza. Are you stupid or something? Again, I come back to it. We're trying to eradicate these spirits, and these people keep bringing them out. They know not what they do. They think it's fun calling upon spirits, but they don't know the real dangers of it. Stop calling upon the spirit realm. It's destructive, and it's going to control your life. Don't play with the Ouija boards. Don't play with certain games that call these things into existence. For instance, Jason touched on this as well. If by just watching the act, we're taking part in the ceremony, I totally agree. Hollywood knows this, but this is the deception game. I think it is part of the process. It's one thing to expose an evil spirit, but it's another thing to play a deadly game with your life and your soul by conjuring them and bringing them into the world. It's a real thing. Now, before I wrap this part up here, Jeff, is it possible that animals can become possessed as well? We know that in Scripture, the pigs were able to be possessed by evil spirits, but they threw themselves off the cliff, or did the evil spirits do that? Anyway, very rarely we get reports of bears mauling people, brutally killing them, tearing them limb for limb. It is a very, very rare act, but if you speak to park rangers, if you speak to those who are bear experts, they will tell you every once in a great while, there's a rogue bear who has been killing people, ripping them apart. And most cryptozoologists would say, oh, this is just a dogman encounter. Well, no, not exactly. It's actually a bear. They do this. So the question is, can an animal become possessed? I think it's possible, especially if this spirit can't get to you. So if he can't get to you in his spirit form, could he get to you in animal form? Well, this isn't hard to fathom, because we know that they take the form of dogmen and everything else under the sun. But let's just say they wanted to possess a bear. Yeah, I think it's possible. The more logical reason and explanation would be that the bear was shot and has a bullet still lodged in it, and that's enough to piss off the bear. Or the bear has been in a trap, a snare, or it's got an arrow stuck in it, so therefore it's angry, it's rogue, and it's coming for its next victim, which happens to be a human. Speaking of that, of knowing the difference between animal and evil presence, okay, if an animal's charging you, you're going to be scared, no doubt about it. Anyone would be, unless you can remember what you need to do to stand tall against it, like some have done against grizzly bears. Now, if there's an animal or a creature charging you, and you feel an evil presence, something completely different there. And I'd have to believe that you know the difference between an animal and a monster, right? Yeah, I would think so. So most of these people are saying when they encounter a dogman or other creatures, they're saying, I felt an evil presence. 9 times out of 10, that is what is being reported. I'll give you an example. My friend Zach Sterick, when he had come in contact with the Route 14 monster back in May of 2022, we also know it as the Enfield monster. When he encountered that, he did not feel an evil presence. He felt that it was a scared creature trying to get away from something. He may be right, because, that's the time when the farmers are out doing what they need to do for their fields. And this thing was probably affected by it. But again, this is that creature with 3 legs, all right? But he also said that it was reptilian. It almost kind of looked like a deformed dinosaur in a way. But he didn't feel the evil presence. So I ask you again, such as Brian's encounter with the humanoid, he felt an evil presence. You will know the presence of something like this when you see it, right? And I would think that even an unsaved person will pick up on such a powerful force. What more can we say about such a terrifying creature? The reports suggest that it is horned, it's huge, it's a hulking humanoid being. Chimera, part this and that. We can go into theories that it was bestiality. We can go into theories that it's a hybrid of some sort. It's a supernatural entity, yada, yada, yada. But I think Jason is onto something here. We need to be very, very careful when it comes to these kinds of creatures involved in this field. The reason why the Goatman is a part of cryptozoology is because it's crypto, the hidden, zoology, the animal. So it's part goat, okay? That's the reason it's part of this field. Like I said, it's a dark field to be a part of, but it's also an amazing one too, where we get to actually talk about the amazing creatures that God created that have been here since the beginning of time. But with something like this, it's a different story. All bets are off. I want to thank my friend Jeff Carone for being here today. This has been a great discussion, something that has been on the back burner for a while. As I try to embark more into these accounts and these stories, he's going to be joining me more if he's up to it. Hope I didn't scare him too much with the lore and the darkness behind all this. But I think he's willing to be coming on board for another show here down the road, especially if we dive into more ropins. What say you, Jeff?
I say thank you for having me on your show, and I want to thank your audience too for allowing me to speak to you guys. And it's been a pleasure. A lot to take in. Whoa.
It is a lot to take in. It is.
Yes, it's exciting. And,
but that's why I had you and Jason here to try to elaborate on a lot of it.
Yep.
But anytime you have a half man, half something, it's worth a discussion.
I'd say so.
And you have people who most likely won't come forward with this type of creature. I've rarely heard cases of people wanting to be seen on shows when they have an encounter with something like this. But you never know. I've had encounters of people we've had shows of people coming forward with encounters of Dogman, Lizardman, my own personal testimony on that as well. That's all for today, folks. Hope you enjoyed today's show. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, very, very important, seek the truth. May God bless and protect every one of you on the other side of the screen. Shabbat Shalom. Peace be with you.